This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll go ahead and run through the questions. So first one is a question about the restaurants. When will the Grill and Blue Heron be open for dine-in? So that's it's a great question. We do not know the answer to that right now. There are numerous factors that are involved in that. The first one is the first one is there is a lot of additional cost to comply with all of the constraints for reopening. So we do have a plan. We've run through that. It requires a significant amount of additional labor in order to monitor restrooms, monitor patrons, take in other types of information, extra cleaning, etc. And it's actually not an insignificant cost to do so. So that's one thing. The other is now that things are opening up and we're seeing a resurgence of spread of COVID. We also have to be concerned with the risk not just to residents but also to employees and staff. One of the things that Governor Newsom made clear a couple weeks ago is that it's actually quite interesting. Even if an employee is working 100% from home, if they contract COVID, they have no contact with the office whatsoever, it still is considered a work-related injury. So basically, things have been laid down that anybody that contracts COVID as an employee, that's going to actually be put on the business as the business's responsibility, believe it or not. And so, we have to factor in the risk of that as well, which is a financial component, but then also, of course, a component with actual safety and maintaining social distance, etc. Since we have alternative ways of providing food service to the community, we're not in a rush to reopen those and take on additional costs and additional liability, until we have a clearer, better picture of what's going on. So we do regularly evaluate this, and we're evaluated on an ongoing basis. But at this point in time, we do not have a specific date for reopening the restaurants, or the clubhouse. We're continuing to, very carefully monitor what's happening as things are reopening. And it's been a little bit disturbing. I don't know if you have been following the case counts, in Madera, but there's been quite a spike, it's a rumor. I don't have anything confirmed. It's rumors only, but it is my understanding that, during the first several months of this, we didn't have any cases of COVID in Eastern Madera County. We do now. And so, we're going to continue to be cautious and prudent, and open things up as we can in a way that is, safe and also financially responsible, being good stewards of the funds, for the homeowners. So that's where we are right now. And like I said, we'll continue to evaluate and monitor that. But at this point in time, there isn't a change or a specific date when we'll be opening up for in-person dining. And as that changes, we'll of course inform the community, and keep everybody up to speed with what's going on with that. Next question is related to Black Hawk Lake. This is a question that was asked before. It's a repeat question from the same person. I think we've covered it a couple times, but there's no change at Black Hawk Lake right now. We think we covered it 3 or 4 times actually on these calls. But per our use agreement of Black Hawk Lake, we have to provide certain services, and we're still not back up to speed, with full security staff and full patrol and full resources, available to meet all those needs. So we were close to doing that. Okay, And then and likewise with the restaurants, we're continuing to evaluate and find, a point in time when we can meet those obligations and reopen, Black Hawk Lake, which I am, eager and anxious to do so. I do expect that will be happening sometime within the next couple weeks, but I do not have a specific date at this time. But when I do, again, we will announce that, to the community, and we would certainly, like to have that, amenity, open again. But that's where we are with that presently. Next question is, that's part of this. Same status, that we were before. Afternoon. So we're going through that, looking at the guidelines, but we're still in the same spot where until we reach phase 3 in Madera County, we are opening the pool, even with the Department of Health's permission, which we can, submit a plan and, see if we can get permission from them to open up. But even if we do that, all right, the interpretation of the law at this point is until we're in phase 3, we're still in we would still be in violation of state order, which means that if there were to be a problem, not necessarily a COVID problem, but any type of problem, that our insurance would likely not cover the accident or the issue. And so it creates a lot of liability, for the association. Again, I am super eager to get the pool open. We were able to keep the pool open, or keep the hot tub open, through most of the season until we ran into that, change in interpretation a couple weeks ago. So, clearly that's what we want to do, but we have to do that in a way that is, in a way that is prudent and fiscally responsible and doesn't put the association at significant risk. I know some other counties, some other associations have made different choices. I have discussed this with various, with various members, in the community, but that's where we are right now. And again, as soon as we can get that open in a way that's safe and efficacious, and that we have coverage and protection, we will certainly do that. Okay, next one I've got is a question about the tennis courts. So there was a question last week about, where did the tennis court budget go? So I've pulled the details up on that to answer that this week. And so I can give you specific numbers, not just the general categories. But basically, the bulk of the tennis court expense, which remember is, it's $5,000 roughly on an annual basis out of a roughly $5.5 million budget. So it's a pretty small chunk of our overall expenditures. But $2,000 of that is allocated to the tennis courts for liability insurance. $1,200 roughly is allocated to the tennis courts for electric. That includes the lights that are used when people are playing, but it also includes other lighting that is available around. And if you think about it, it's not a whole lot of money. It's about $100 a month, but that's another significant chunk. About $500 is allocated to the tennis court for property taxes, and then there's about $500, roughly on an annual basis in labor. And that's labor is for cleaning, for picking up the trash, for doing, maintenance as needed, like, we replaced one of the nets not super long ago. And then there's a couple $100 in there for, materials and supplies for when we do need to do something like replace the nets. But between the insurance, the electric, the property tax, and the labor, it's about $4,800, and that's what makes up the major components of the tennis court cost and tennis court budget. Okay. The next question is it's actually a lot of questions, mostly related to YSPUC. So the first one is YSPUC considered a mutual water company or a private utility? YSPUC is a private utility that is regulated by the Public Utilities Commission and the California State Water Board. And so, it is not a mutual water company. And we're public, like I said, we're a public utility regulated by the California Public Utility Commission. And it says YSPUC was absorbed into YLOA in 1987. Does YSPUC have a board of directors? When is the annual meeting for YSPUC and director elections? Who are considered the shareholders, the YLOA entity, or are all homeowners considered shareholders? Now, YSPUC is a wholly owned subsidiary of YLOA. So as such, the homeowners could, be considered to have an undivided interest in the water company. But it's a wholly owned subsidiary of the association. It's a kind of interesting history. We received the water company as a settlement for fees that were due us by Titan Corporation. Titan Corporation was a company that was doing the construction and the original subdivision and development here in YLP. And as part of that settlement, they deeded the water company to us, okay, because they owed us money for certain things that they hadn't fulfilled. And so we received the water company as compensation for that. And since that time, it is, like I said, has been a wholly owned subsidiary of YSPUC. The board of directors is, okay, so let me back up a second. As a public utility, as a private, it's kind of interesting, the words private and public. Okay, it's a private company, but it's regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission. But YSPUC is subject to completely different, not completely, but to very different rules than YLOA as a homeowners association. Okay, it has different requirements for meetings. It has different requirements for boards of directors. Boards of directors are not elected. For private corporations. But the way we do that here is that in general, the YLOA directors also serve as YSPUC directors. Now, if a YLOA director chooses to not serve as a YSPUC director, then the remaining directors invite and appoint another director to serve in that person's stead. But we issue an annual report in July. It's a safety report and covers water production and a whole bunch of other things. That'll be coming out soon. But there is not a but the annual meeting and appointment of board of directors, occurs concurrently with the election of the YLOA board of directors. It actually happens in the same meeting. We have a YLOA meeting. We suspend that temporarily. We call a YSPUC meeting. The directors are sworn in, and that's how that process works. Okay, so YSPUC budget was presented at board meeting in December. Again, it's not subject to the same, we provide that in the YSPUC meetings. We show where we are in budget with our forecast, just like we do with YLOA. So that information is available to the community, but there's no requirements for distribution and of those documents in the same way there is for a homeowners association. Not that information isn't available, it is, but that's actually a very expensive process. So it actually saves us, quite a few thousands of dollars, to not send out copies of those. But for the particular person that asked this question, of course, we're happy to share what that information is. I actually was talking with the president of the YSPUC board today, and I do anticipate that we will have a YSPUC board meeting in June. I can't confirm that for certain. That's the board's call, but I believe we will be having a YSPUC board meeting again here in June. So there are no, again, YSPUC is a completely different kind of entity than a homeowners association. It doesn't have bylaws, notices of annual meetings. Consumer confidence report, it is released in July on an annual basis. Budget's presented is adopted and presented in usually our December board meeting or our November board meeting. Because the fiscal year for YSPUC also runs from January 1st to January 1st, or to December 31st. What's the status of the water pipeline replacement and project timeline? Is the pipeline project included in the YSPUC budget? So in answer to those questions, we continue to work. We're working on Crystal Cave right now, installing pipeline. It costs us roughly at this time $650,000 to $700,000 a mile to dig and trench and install that infrastructure between labor and materials. It is not included in the YSPUC budget, as the board elected to fund that through YLOA, which is perfectly legitimate as a wholly owned subsidiary. So it just was a financing vehicle that they used for funding. So they funded that through YLOA instead of YSPUC. At the time, I don't have all the details on exactly why we did it that way, but that's how it was done. Okay, next question is YLOA documents request form. Can the request form be posted on the YLOA website in writable form and request for document requests? Okay, I'm gonna follow up on this one directly in response to the email. But there are a whole host of rules about what's available to homeowners, and which is most information. Okay, but there's a different set of rules about what is available for review, what is available for copy, what is available to review in the office. And there's a lot of time that's involved in preparing many of those documents. So for this particular questioner, if I'd be happy to talk with you further about the details of that. But of course we can provide those. In terms of a form, on the website, I don't think that's something that we're going to do, right now. But it is something that the board is currently discussing. Okay, next one related to YLOA documents. Can the governing documents on the YLOA website be updated? The bylaws are dated 1986. I thought they had been revised in 2011, but not sure. Well, this was, we've tried multiple years to get our governing docs updated. However, to update our governing docs requires approval from 50% plus one of all homeowners. So, our participation level just isn't there. So there have been a couple proposals to try to revise, the bylaws and restate them, taking out old language that is confusing because it's no longer, legal language. Some of that we can strike, but we can't rewrite the bylaws, and get those approved or make changes to them unless we have 50% plus one approval of all homeowners. So that really ties our hands in that regard. 2 years ago, we had an election, and during that time we had two proposals that we were trying to modify the quorum requirements in our bylaws to reduce quorum so that we would more often have a valid election. It's actually recommended by Davis Sterling that we don't have a quorum at all. That's their current recommendation, but our bylaws require that we have a 40% quorum at our first balloting. If we don't receive 40% quorum at our first balloting, then the meeting is suspended, and the follow-up meeting happens, and at the second meeting we have to receive a 25% quorum. Doesn't seem like that would be that much to get. However, it has proven difficult, and we're always like right at that level of having enough voter participation to have a valid election according to our bylaws. And it's actually going to be more challenging this year, because in the past our bylaws, in the past our bylaws specified that only homeowners in good standing were eligible to vote. So if homeowners were not current on their dues or didn't have an active payment plan, they didn't actually have the right to vote in the election. This actually was very common across, most HOAs had similar, language. This year, that's different. SB 323 that became effective January 1st changed those rules. Okay, they changed the election process quite significantly. They made it longer. They made it more expensive. I think I mentioned last week Governor Brown had vetoed this bill, but Governor Newsom passed it, kind of much to the dismay of homeowners associations across the state, because there's some inconsistent language and there's a lot more compliance. There's a lot more compliance issued that really just stretches things out, makes it more complicated, makes it more expensive. And some inconsistencies in the way the law itself is written. But as of January 1st, all homeowners, regardless of their status in paying dues or not, are eligible to vote. And you might ask, well, why does that make it harder to get a quorum? Well, let's just to keep the numbers simple, let's say we have 2,200, lots. So we have 2,200 potential voters. However, if 200 of those lots are behind on dues payments, then we only have 2,000 eligible voters. And so the quorum on 2,000 eligible voters is 500, right, at the second meeting to get 25%. When you're dealing with 2,200, then in order to reach quorum, you have to have 550 votes. And we're usually kind of right in that range of 520 to 570. And so, it is going to be harder to reach quorum this year. So, please encourage everybody to cast a ballot. That is absolutely the best way for this to be done. It's why it was proposed to, reduce the quorum requirements in our bylaws so that we didn't have to have as many people participate, so we were more likely to have a valid election. We had a situation, I think it's occurred twice in our history as an association, but I know for certain it occurred once. I believe that was 4 years ago, where we didn't reach a quorum. And if we don't reach a quorum, then the election is not considered valid. In fact, we cannot even open the ballots. And since the election is not considered valid, per legal statute, you don't open the ballots, and the existing board continues on in place as is. And so it's always much better for people to participate and for people to cast ballots and to get enough participation, to have an election that allows us to count those votes and count those ballots to determine who the board of directors is. You know, and so again, please do vote. You know, please encourage everybody to vote. You know, we definitely want, we'd love to have 100% participation, but we need a minimum, an absolute minimum of 25% participation of all owners in order to have to meet the required quorum and have a valid election. Okay. So there are a couple other things. So our bylaws were not revised in 2011. The copies we have are the most, current that were recorded. And like I said, we're unable to make additional changes to those without, other than very minor things, very specific things, without 50% plus one approval of all owners. So, the board can make rules changes, but we cannot change the bylaws or the DORs, except through a very specific process. Okay, so I think that answers the questions that I received this week. I'll open up for a quick Q&A if anybody wants clarification on any of those things, or has another simple question that we didn't address. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us. I do have great news. The PPP program. Yeah.
This is Beata. I have a question about YSPUC.
Okay.
You said it's a fiscal year or calendar year?
The fiscal year and calendar year are the same for YSPUC.
So it's what, December is the year ending?
It begins January 1st, ends December 31st.
Okay.
That's actually required. So.
Okay, and then another question I have, we had an issue about the YLOA owning have the deeds to the road. They didn't have the deeds to the roads. Did we ever get that straightened out?
That's still in process. It got interrupted with the COVID issue. We did find the original documents. This issue was addressed in 2009. However, the documents were not recorded. They were given to our lawyer at the time. It was sent to the title company, but it didn't make it from the title company to the county. And so, unfortunately, when we checked, they will not record that without an original signature. The company that was, so just to back up for those of you that are on the call and don't know the details, during 1987, during its Titan bankruptcy, Safeco was the surety at the time. Okay, that was the insurance company that was basically responsible for the build out of the subdivision. So when YLOA was formed, okay, the title to the roads was actually placed in trust for YLOA, and was maintained in trust and held for the benefit of the residents. But what happened in 1987 is that that title erroneously got transferred to the surety at the time, which was Safeco. And then Safeco, to recover their funds, sold lots to another entity. And we were able to get, so that was later reversed and the title got put back into Safeco's name. Like I said, this was addressed in 2009, but since it didn't get recorded, we have to track down and trace down that, and get a new quitclaim deed. However, it gets complicated because Safeco was acquired by another company. And so, we're in the process of getting that taken care of. when all the COVID stuff hit. And I'll just be honest with you guys, I've had my hands, completely full, during this time. But it will get, we will be able to get that, I'm certain we will be able to get it resolved. But that's the current status.
So we're not able to drill that well until that gets resolved?
At this point, we can't drill the well at the golf course until the title is transferred. Yes.
Okay. And then
So why they granted us the right to drill the well in the first place, and now they're changing the rules on us, I don't know. Obviously, it hasn't been an issue before because we've been able to drill wells on, in similar locations. But the county inspector that we had that the second time around to drill the replacement well, won't let us move further until we get that other piece of bureaucracy taken care of. All right. So,
okay. I have one more question. We've
sure.
had a lot of policies that was approved by the board. Doesn't that, in a way, kind of change our government, our governance of our well-away, the bylaws?
It doesn't change the bylaws. There's a hierarchy of what rules have precedence over, over what documents have precedence over what other documents. For example, governing law, state law, Davis-Sterling has top priority, so that if your bylaws violate state law, then of course the state law takes precedence. But then the hierarchy goes down through the bylaws, through the declaration of restrictions, down to the level of what's called rules. The board is able to adopt rules. However, they can't adopt rules that are in violation of our bylaws or DORs, okay, unless those bylaws and DORs are also in violation of state law. So and we do understand it's confusing, but rules are under the purview of the board. So the board can expand and extend and adjust, rules in the community, as long as those rules aren't in conflict with the bylaws and the declaration of restrictions, and of course, the governing law, Davis-Sterling. And other corporate law applies too in many cases. Okay. There's actually a pretty good article, on, I think the last one I saw on this was Davis-Sterling, but there's some other good resources, and I'll make a note, for people that are interested to provide, kind of some of that outline on the, on one of our web pages, because it is interesting how that works. The good news that I wanted to share with PPP, so PPP has been a real time consumer and a real stress for me, because we had a very, very limited time, okay, in order to take advantage of the funds. But Congress approved last Friday. Actually, House approved a week before, Senate approved last Wednesday. President Trump signed on Friday a alteration to the PPP, which extends the period of time that we have to use funds from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. It changes the percentage of funds that have to be dedicated to wages versus, other basically utility costs. Change that ratio from 75-25 to 60-40. And it also changed the, there was a fail-safe or safe harbor forgiveness clause that if you reduce your employee count during the COVID time and that you rehired or offered those employees their jobs back by the end of June, you could still qualify for full forgiveness PPP. That deadline has been extended and pushed to December 31st. So I have not yet read through the details of the law, which I need to, read through to understand if there are any other changes that affect us. But it's actually great news for us. It makes it much easier for us to qualify for forgiveness without having to, kind of jump through the legal hoops that they set up to make sure we were in compliance with everything. It just makes it much simpler for us to qualify. So that's actually very, very good news, and it's taken a lot of pressure off of me because all of that had to be done and finished, and the money spent, about 2.5 weeks from now. But now with more time and a relaxing of those restrictions, it's going to be, much easier to go through that process. So that was great news. I'm at least really happy about it. So, and we'll talk more about that at the next board meeting. So.
Hey, Jonathan, it's Gene.
Yeah.
Everybody's been watching what's been going on with the protest, and that's fine. Over the last week, we've got hundreds of thousands of people that are protesting with no masks on, shoulder to shoulder. Shall we hold our breath and just hope that they didn't have the virus and spread it amongst another million people? I think we've got 2 weeks. We need to just sit back and wait and see.
Yeah, I do hear what you're saying, Gene, and it is, it's a funny thing with, funny is not the right word, but it's, we become used to almost any risk. Even when the risk itself doesn't change or the risk itself gets bigger, we become accustomed to it, so it doesn't seem like as much of a risk to us. But I do hear what you're saying, and it is concerning, the spikes that we are seeing, in the spread. And I do think we're going to see, some very significant hotspots and resurgence, of coronavirus, infections. I still think that means we shouldn't panic. So the same things that keep us safe before, social distancing, washing our hands, really are the big ones. But those things are still important, and it's it is going to be interesting. What we have gotten through, is that our hospitals, have supplies and materials and equipment, so we don't expect our hospitals to be overrun, which could have happened, had the rise of COVID happened here like it did in New York, for example. Then we would have been an even worse situation. But this one's not over yet, guys. as I cough from talking to you. This one's not over, okay? We do need to continue to be safe and careful and prudent. Prudence, not panic. But we're planning to take a cautious, prudent approach to reopening, and continue to encourage all of our residents and all of our community to stay safe and to practice social distancing, to practice reduced gathering, and to, definitely wash your hands, and don't touch your mouth, those very things that help prevent the spread of COVID-19. So.
Thank you.
All righty. Anybody else? Okay. Well, good thing we're doing social distancing. So I started coughing when I was reading, Lord of the Rings today from 12 to 1. When I do some of those voices, it kind of gets my throat irritated. But hopefully that's all it is. But but anyway, thank you guys for joining us tonight. We'll continue to take questions and do the Q&A next Tuesday as well. So if there are other thoughts, questions, or feedback that you have, please let us know. Ballots got mailed. Ballots for this election got mailed yesterday, so you should be receiving those soon. We do have a candidates forum scheduled for this Sunday, where the candidates will be asked some questions, so you can get to know them and make a good determination about who you think would represent your interest best on the board. So please put that on your calendar and join us for that call on Sunday. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Great job as usual.